Destiny. Walls of Destiny. Part 1. Chapter 6. The House of Burdoc the Red. After passing the curious little town of Thistle Run, they found Burdoc's house tucked away at the end of a long dead-end road, which had only one other dwelling besides the wizard's, as well as a small pond. It was not a small house, but smaller and more humble than one might imagine for a great wizard to live in. It was made of stone bricks with ivy growing up the walls. There was just one story, but with a loft and a small wooden barn off to the left of it. Behind it stood the majestic and rugged heights of the Clevendorn mountain range, also known as Gleemandrade, the name consisting of two words in their corresponding languages, cleve, meaning cliff, and dorn, meaning thorn, or that which gives trouble. Losgrel was the first one off his horse. The others followed him to the red wooden door. He grabbed the knocker and rapped 3 times. Suddenly there was the deep bellowing of some kind of animal. Baroo! 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 They heard. The head of a large yellow dog appeared in the window next to the door, startling Losgrel as he instantly reached for his sword. From outside the door, they could hear a woman's voice. Visitors! Visitors! She cried. We have visitors. They heard footsteps coming to the door accompanied by the grumbling of a man's voice. What's all the commotion about, now? Said the man as he opened the door. Vis, you were right, we have company, he said, looking back at the woman and trying to restrain the dog. Yes? Can I help you? Asked the silver-tinged brown-haired man, studying them through a pair of gold-framed spectacles. As the man stood before them at the door, arguing with the dog, Milo and Longfellow wondered if they even had the right house. They didn't know what a wizard should look like, but they were sure that they didn't wear overalls and unkempt beards as this man did. Burdoc the Red? Asked Losgrel with some hesitation. Well, I am known by many colors, but yes, that is I, me, said Burdoc excitedly. We were sent by Yushime of Idriaxlin. He said to give you this letter, said Losgrel, handing over the letter. Why? Yushime? One moment, please. John Barrows. Back. Go lie down, said Burdoc in a bellowing voice as the large dog cowered to the back room. Now, let's see here, he said as his focus shifted to the letter. After reading a few lines, he briefly glanced up at the party and muttered, yes, of course. He paused from his reading and said to them, come in. Please, come in. They all went inside and Burdoc continued to read as he followed them in. His eyes lit up suddenly. Jack, he exclaimed as he trotted outside excitedly. By the oar. It is Jack. Milo stood in the doorway in astonishment as Burdoc greeted the elephant and began a series of frenzied hand gestures as if communicating in some way with the beast. Jack spoke back with nods, foot stomps, and trunk swinging. Everyone watched in amusement and bewilderment as the unusual conversation played out. The two of them are very old friends, said the woman. You've all missed breakfast, but there are still a few biscuits left if you are hungry. They followed as she led them into the sunlit kitchen. That is, everyone except for Losgrel, who waited at the door to speak with Burdoc. The aroma of herbs hanging to dry mingled with that of freshly cooked breakfast called to them, and after several days on the road a proper meal was certainly in order. John Barrows won't hurt you. He knows friend from foe, she said, gesturing toward the dog. Don't be shy, help yourself. And sit down if you'd like, you look exhausted, continued the woman as she pulled out 3 chairs for them. How long have you been writing? About 4 days, from Idriaxlin, chimed Longfellow. The walled city. I see, she said with a nod. Well, there's plenty of fruit if you'd like. Let me get you some tea, it's the finest around, said the woman as she hurried about the kitchen cupboards. Oh, and look, Burdoc's finest homemade whiskey. Never too early for a bit of whiskey, she said, as she gestured, offering the crude bottle to the visitors. I'll have some tea, please, said Napari. Certainly, dear. Oh, where are my manners? My name is Meredith. Meredith of Orkiero. And what are your names? She said as she poured tea for all of them. Milo, feeling at ease enough to reveal his true name, spoke first. I am Milo T. Cobb, he said, giving a hint of a smile. Both Burdoc and Losgrel looked at Milo with eyebrows raised at the revelation he had been using an alias. Longfellow cleared his throat. Finby Longfellow, he said proudly. Oh, a couple of Atlanteans, remarked Meredith. And what do the middle letters stand for then? The B is for brilliant. I was a quick learner as a child. And yours, Milo? Meredith inquired. My parents died before a suitable name could be found, said Milo as he looked down at his shoes. Oh, I am sorry, dear. I am sure when all this is over with, a suitable name will find you. And who are you, miss? Asked Meredith. Napari Conterin, said the seer. What very interesting names. Especially yours, dear, commented Meredith. It isn't often that we have guests, you know, she said as she sat down with her own cup of tea. In fact, it has been nearly 8 months, unless you count the mountain folk. Oh, and that wandering gypsy last month, and... Mountain folk? Asked Milo. Just then, Burdoc had come back inside from his talk with Jack and overheard the part about the mountain folk and walked right past Losgrel and appeared at the door of the kitchen. Don't fall for her story tales, said Burdoc. There are no mountain folk. It's simply, they are mere legend. Oh, what's the harm, Bertie? Ask me again when he isn't around. I will tell you all you want to know about the mountain folk, whispered Meredith. Burdoc, may I have a word? Asked Losgrel. With a gesture of acknowledgement, Burdoc swiftly followed Losgrel into the next room. You have finished the letter, said Losgrel, focusing upon the wizard. Letter? Oh yes, the letter, exclaimed Burdoc as he felt around in his pockets. One moment. Now where did I set it? Hat rack? End table? No. Here it is, he said as he picked it up and intently finished reading. He lowered the letter and adjusted his glasses and looked at Losgrel with great concern. I am in agreement with you, Chimay. I do not think for a moment that the king of Wolflandia would allow even one battalion for Rabor's purposes. The wizard paused and stared at the letter. And this. Napari, this seer, she is a true and proven prophet. Yushai trusts her word. And she has been reading people in the walled city for many years now. And she is one of my kinsmen. A Cedronavian descended from an ancient line of knights. We have no reason not to trust her, said Losgrel in earnest. But she has not seen anything else of Rabor's plan? Not yet, said Losgrel. I see, said the wizard in deep thought. Is the COL aware of this threat? Asked Burdoc as he folded the letter and tucked it into a pocket. I am sure that by now they are aware of her death. However, I am told they will not perceive it as an immediate threat, said Losgrel. Good, good. It's best that they are not aware of her prophecy for now. We have a chance to solve this ourselves without paranoid government stooges making the situation worse, said the wizard. However, if they were aware of the threat, they could better prepare for it, said the knight as he looked out the windows at Jack and the horses. Perhaps. But you see, if breakfast is prepared, it most assuredly will get eaten, chuckled Burdoc as he rubbed his belly. Breakfast has been prepared and neither of us have eaten yet. After we eat, I want to gather everyone together for a brief meeting. Burdoc strode into the kitchen, prepared a plate for himself, and sat as the others were just finishing theirs. After finishing his meal, he called everyone into the living room. It is wonderful to meet all of you, began the wizard. However, I do wish it were under different circumstances. We are truly fortunate that Napari was blessed with the prophecy of the potential war, but unfortunately, she has not yet seen what triggers said war. Not yet anyway. The good news is it is not just prophets and wizards who have the ability to have a vision of the future. That means any of you could potentially see the intentions of the prince. Usually your dreams are private, to share with whom you wish, or no one if you so desire. From this moment, until a vision is had, any dreams, daydreams, fantasies, intrusive thoughts, all of these are now no longer your property. You will share them with the group. Each morning, we will form a circle and any dreams you have will be shared, no matter how trivial. In the morning, we shall leave for the house of Rallar the Wise. He was once my apprentice, but his skill in magical arts has far surpassed my own. If no one has a vision by then, he will know what to do to prevent what is to come. Rallar is about 2.5 days' ride southwest of here. Until then I will cast a spell of permeability on each of us. It may help to make us more receptive to prophecy. You have all been riding for a while and must be exhausted. I would suggest that you get some rest. You'll need it. Burdoc stood and turned to his wife. Mary, if you would, please show our guests to their rooms, and I will lead the horses to the barn. After which, if anyone needs me, I will be in the basement. Burdoc went outside and led the horses into the barn and visited again with Jack. He then built a campfire, focusing his magical energies on his intent. When the fire was roaring, he began his spell, circling around the fire with his beautifully carved jeweled walnut staff, which was full of secret compartments, levers, and buttons. As he moved around the fire speaking incantations of a foreign tongue, the staff seemed to emit grayish-green fumes from the ornate carvings which resembled the complex tattoos of some exotic islander. He then scooped up a handful of ashes and put them in a small jar and went into the house. Unseen, he crept into the rooms which his guests stayed and dipped his finger into the ashes and touched the forehead of each guest and mouthed a brief prayer over them. He then retired into the basement of the house. After at least an hour had passed, the guests began to awake from their naps. Losgrel was the first to arise. He stood outside in the front yard surveying the surrounding area before checking to see that the horses were safe. When he was assured that all was well, he sat down by the still smoldering campfire. Milo awoke and remembered Burdoc's words about dreams, but he couldn't recall a single dream. His exhaustion and his grief must have squelched any dreams he might have had. He felt intrigued and curious about the wizard and went down to the basement with Longfellow to find out what a wizard does in a basement. As they made their way down the noisy stairs, peculiar and unfamiliar smells wafted up toward them. There they found the wizard standing before a bench full of bubbling potions, clattering glass vials and flasks, and the steady sound of some strange chemical process taking place. Shelves were crammed with strange herbs, glistening minerals, and the unmistakable aura of enchantment. The walls were covered in a chaotic tapestry of diagrams and schematics, intricate patterns that defied logic and seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The diagrams hinted at forbidden knowledge, complex equations, and strange machines. Burdoc, his disheveled hair crackling with the energy of a summer storm, looked up from his cluttered workbench. His eyes sparkled with a blend of mischief and ancient wisdom. Ah, you've risen from your rest. I was just finishing some elixirs for our journey. If you could assist me by bringing them upstairs, I'd be most grateful. Milo's gaze was drawn irresistibly to a particularly intriguing schematic on the wall, an elaborate design that resembled some great mechanical bird. Noticing Milo's fascination, Burdoc swiftly moved to block the view, his gesture almost comically protective. Oh, those old doodles? Just the whimsical fantasies of a much younger man. Pay them no mind. Now, if you wouldn't mind, take these elixirs upstairs for me. After an hour had passed, Burdoc trudged up the stairs. Troubled, he sat down at the table and stared out the window. What's wrong, Bertie? Asked Meredith. I tried the seeing stone, the quartz crystal ball, and many other things that might usually work in situations like this. Perhaps I am getting too old, he said as he got up and leaned over to sample her cooking. Needs more garlic, he stated, smacking his lips. Oh, does it now? It's only been a few hours. I'm sure one of you will see something. What about Napari? Said Meredith. We shall see, Burdoc said. I think it's about time to prepare the bonfire for our guests. I will be outside if you need me. He went outside and gathered some oil and kindling and walked to the brush pile he had prepared. Losgrel, who wasn't far off, saw Burdoc and approached him. I am not sure a bonfire is a wise idea at this time, Burdoc. It will draw attention. It's best if no one knows we are here. Oh, nonsense. There is no one around for miles. Burdoc continued to prep the fire, pouring the last of the oil. Besides, I always have a good fire around this time every month. It will be nothing out of the ordinary. Then I hope you are correct, Losgrel said as he looked off into the distance. Be kind, would you, and tell the others the bonfire is about to be lit, ordered the wizard. He picked up his staff from the side of one of the wicker chairs where it had been resting. He raised it to the sky and whispered something. Shortly after, he touched the top of his staff to the pile as a flame appeared in the center of the pile. Wonderful, said the wizard as the weary bunch began to emerge outside. Tonight, we shed our worries and celebrate the now. He reached into his pocket and grabbed a handful of powder and tossed it onto the fire. The fire popped and fizzed and turned beautiful shades of yellow, blue, and green. Everyone looked on in amazement as the fire danced and lit up the darkness. He waved his staff over the fire and whispered, and the fire seemed to grow larger and brighter. Meredith brought food and drink for the guests and set it on the table by the fire. Please sit down. These old chairs are stronger than they look. Have some food. Help yourself. It's quite good, as long as you like strong garlic flavor, said Meredith, giving Burdoc a stern look. I love garlic, said Longfellow as he sat and began to fill his plate. The others sat down as well. Milo was still a bit tired and could have used a couple of hours more sleep. While the others used the chance to talk and take their mind off things, Milo stared into the fire and spoke only when he was spoken to. Jack came out and tried to comfort Milo, causing John Barrows to go into another barking frenzy. Milo appreciated the gesture, but nothing seemed to improve his mood. Napari and Losgrel talked about old Cedronavia and the way things used to be, long ago. Longfellow played fetch with John Barrows as he exchanged stories with Burdoc and talked about life in the walled city. Everyone seemed to be letting loose and having a good time. Well, at least most of them. After finishing the food and the fire and the talking began to die down, Burdoc dragged out some more brush that he had forgotten about. Well, that's the last of it. Well, at least until next month. The group sat around the fire and made small talk, easing the tension of the uncertainty they faced. Milo had been drifting in and out of sleep and was startled awake by the call of a coyote off in the distance, just in time to see Burdoc stand and stretch before going inside. Losgrel gave another brief scan of the surroundings and listened briefly. As he looked about, there was a loud crash in the woods, near the road, followed by running and rustling. He bolted out towards the sound, without hesitation, followed by Longfellow. Long ran to the road to see a dark shadow moving slowly. Losgrel, he whispered. Is that you? Yes. Come, he whispered back. Probably just a deer or other large beast. It's too dark to know for sure. Whatever it was, it's gone. The two stood for a few moments in silence, listening for any new sounds. After hearing nothing, they began back to the house. While Long could barely see his own hand in front of his face and tripped and stumbled on the uneven ground, Losgrel seemed to have no trouble navigating the dimly lit surroundings. So, you work with Milo? How well do you know him? Asked Losgrel. Yes, for 7 or 8 months. I would say I know him pretty well. He is a good friend. I ask because I am deeply concerned about his emotional state. It is critical for all of us to be thinking clearly. Losgrel stopped and listened for a brief moment, thinking he may have heard something. Do you think he will come around? He is full of surprises. Just give him some time. He has suffered many losses in the last year. Time isn't a luxury that we have at the moment. Talk to him. See what you can do. As Losgrel took a final scan of the area, another coyote howl broke the silence. Both went into the house and to their rooms for the night. Thanks to the warm comfort of the home and hospitality of its owners, they all fell into a deep and restful slumber. That is, all except for the seer. Though she slept, it was anything but restful. She had many dreams, but none would reveal the intention of the Prince of Wolflandia. The next morning Milo awoke and went out into the living room. Losgrel was already awake and outside checking on the horses and inspecting the immediate area. Burdoc was next to arise, and he sat and made small talk with Milo and waited for the others. When the room was full, Burdoc recounted a seemingly meaningless dream about dogs with the ability to climb trees. Neither Milo nor Longfellow could not recall a single dream. Loskrell claimed to have no dreams whatsoever. It seemed like a total loss until Napari recounted her dream. As much as she tried to focus on Rabor and his intention, her dreams kept drifting to Milo. She saw him on his way back to his homeland. Broken and defeated, he rode on the train. She saw Jack, once again, sadly looking for a new companion. In her vision, the west wall of Idriaxlin was ablaze with fire and the south gate was broken. The city was in disarray and the people were running in all directions. Soldiers were killing and burning. She could not see to what army the soldiers belonged and their faces were blurred. As the seer recounted her premonition regarding Milo, Milo looked on in disbelief in her prophecy and disdain for the seer. Rabor had gotten the news about the princess just half a day after the fact and was invited to the steward's chambers, but in his rage he declined. By the time Milo and company arrived at the house of Burdoc, Rabor had arrived at his father's palace. He and his men rode nearly non-stop as soon as they had gotten word. At first sight of the prince, the guards saluted and praised him. Rabor, ignoring the guards, stormed past and entered the building. He spoke in his native Fernusian dialect, demanding a private meeting with his father, the king. "I have heard the news, my son. It is a tragedy indeed. She will be missed by all," said the king as he sat down. He paused for a moment and studied his son as he also sat. He could see that it wasn't sadness or loss that was in Rabor's eyes, but rather hatred and vengeance. He knew his son well and realized his intentions. He let out a sigh and continued. "You have come all this way, not to chit-chat I suspect. What is it that you are here for? What will you ask of me today?" Rabor reached into his pocket and fetched a nail file out of a small bag as his father spoke, and began to maintain his perfectly manicured hands, occasionally making eye contact with the king. If it were not for the irresponsibility of the Soel, and the idiocy of her peasant friend, she would still be alive. And if not for Central Midlandia's hunger for domination of the land, they would not have so many enemies. And now another has been added to the list. "Father, if you would do this one favor for me," he looked his father in the eyes and continued. "Allow me command of your army so that we can destroy the Soel, so that sovereignty for all can be had once again," said Rabor, jabbing the nail file into the table and his pale face turning red with anger. "Absolutely not. You know that I have always detested the eastern lands, but there is too much at stake. We were on the cusp on uniting the West, but until we can find another way, we must lay low and be patient, and besides that, our economy needs the dash." "But we can beat them," said Rabor, pounding his fist on the table. "We have many allies, together we can destroy them, and the railway will be ours." "Oh, you think that would be the case," said the king with a sarcastic laugh. "Son, you are thinking with your heart right now. Patience is the order of the day. Things will get bad. I fear that war is in fact coming, but we will be on the winning side if only we have patience. You know what the old prophet said. It will be our lands and our culture that will prevail after the Great War." "Nonsense. I don't believe that. I have never believed that. We make our own destiny." The king looked at him skeptically. "Never?" he asked. He paused and got up to leave the room. He turned back toward Rabor and said, "My answer remains. No. I demand that you let the issue rest until you are yourself again." The prince stormed out in a rage, cursing and yelling in Fernusian. The next morning, he went back to his house in Dulcissima to devise his plan. "Well," began Burdoc, "we are yet no closer to an answer, therefore we will proceed with the plan to go and visit my old apprentice, and we must do it quickly. We leave after breakfast." By the time they had eaten and Burdoc had packed what he needed for the journey, and after trying to convince Meredith that he would be okay and that he would be back soon, it was nearly noon. As they were about to leave, Burdoc realized that he had forgotten his hat. He never went anywhere without his beat-up old hat that he had long ago made with his own hands from the leathery skin of a giant mushroom. "Mary," he called as he frantically looked about. "Mary, where's my hat?" "I don't know where your stinking old hat is," she scowled. "Where did you set it last?" "It was right over there last night," he said, gesturing toward the coat rack. "It isn't my job to keep track of your things," snapped Meredith. "I wasn't implying that it was. I simply thought you may have seen it as all," said Burdoc apologetically. "I am sorry, Bertie," she said, putting her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "It's just that I am worried about you. I don't want you to go." "Oh, don't worry, it's just a short journey. And just think, I will have some new stories to add to the old ones that I keep retelling." "Oh look, my hat over there on the chair," said the wizard as he put on the hat and adjusted to his liking. He kissed her goodbye and went out the door. Loskrell, though troubled by the delay over the hat, let Burdoc take the lead, for it was him that knew the way. "Today and much of tomorrow, the way will be mild, consisting of well-traveled and maintained roads," announced Burdoc as they began to ride. "After that, it will not be so easy. A series of footpaths and old roads and shortcuts of unknown condition will be our destiny." Soon dark clouds began to swirl and form above the group. The threat of rain grew with every step they traveled. It was cold outside, cold enough so that they were on that border between snow, rain, or sleet. Even if the rain began to fall, there was nothing they could do. They had to keep moving until nightfall. If it only held off until then. Dark and foreboding clouds continued to roll off the jagged peaks behind them. The resonant staccato rhythm of hail began to sound off all around them. The band braced for the cold and damp punishments the heavens had in store for them. As the rolling torrent seemed to draw ever closer, Burdoc held his staff high and spoke softly in some strange tongue, and a blue glow began to form around the mysterious jewel at the tip of the staff. As the first icy pellets began to sting their faces, the staff seemed to vibrate and hum. Burdoc then thrust the staff high into the air, and the glowing blue aura leapt from the staff and into the sky above. A warm breeze from the south washed over. The sound of the hail grew further and further away. Longfellow looked at Milo in amazement. "He can control the weather," he whispered. Burdoc, hearing him, soberly replied, "No, young man. I merely postponed it. And postponing it can only last so long. We ride until night, and with luck, we can set up camp before it starts again." They pushed ahead along the winding path. Burdoc hummed a tune that seemed familiar to Milo, though he could not place it. It was soothing and put him at ease. Jack swayed his trunk as if following along with the calming melody. They had made significant progress, and the sun was beginning to set. A chill began to settle in on them all. Soon they came upon a small grove of trees with a small cleft inside. It was a good place to camp, as they would be shielded from the cold wind and somewhat out of sight as well. "The Chinzai isn't far. The road isn't safe at this hour. We set up camp here and cross it in the morning," stated the wizard. "Why not use the highway as much as we can?" asked Longfellow. "Wouldn't it be quicker?" "It would be quicker, but the highway carries many risks. It is a direct route to Dulcecima, Rabor's city. He may already have spies on the road looking for Milo." "We will take less dangerous routes," said Burdoc as he climbed down from his horse and looked up at the dark, foreboding sky. Nipari and Longfellow worked on getting a fire going while the others set up their tents and put a canopy adjacent to the fire. Burdoc and Losgrel set up a tent for themselves, and Milo set up the tent for himself, and Longfellow then helped with Nipari's tent. Setting up and breaking down the camp each night took up much of their time and energy, but it was something that had to be done, for it was simply too cold to sleep under the stars. Soon the fire was ablaze, and sparks rose out of it, mingling with the first hints of snow that would lightly fall upon their camp for the entire night. The group sat around the fire eating and making small talk, mostly thwarting Losgrel's attempts to discuss the finer details of the mission. Losgrel grew more and more agitated as the snow began to accumulate atop of the tents and the animals and, more importantly, the road. "I wouldn't worry too much over the snow. I am sure by noon tomorrow most of it will have melted away," remarked Burdoc. "I suggest we all retire for the night. Get some rest and stay warm," he said as he hoisted himself up with his staff and went into his tent. Milo and Longfellow retreated into their tent as well, and shortly Losgrel also gave way to his need for rest. Nipari stayed by the fire, underneath the canopy, feeding it occasionally. Milo could see that her silhouette outlined by the fire, and the dream she had shared about Milo giving into his fears and going back to Atlantia began to weigh heavily upon him. The next morning, Milo awoke with a painful chill in his bones. He went out to the fire, which was still smoldering, and found Losgrel scanning the area and Nipari asleep next to the fire, where she had stayed the whole night surrounded by the animals. After eating breakfast and warming themselves by the fire, they brushed the snow off everything and packed it all back up, burdening the animals once again. Before long they were once again on the move, heading south toward the main road. Rowler's house was still at least 2 nights away, maybe 3 depending on what sort of trouble lay ahead. The dry winter air grew warmer as the morning progressed. The mesmerizing noise of hooves compressing the snow slowly gave way to the sloshing of the muddy earth beneath them. Their spirits lifted as the warmth of the sun gently touched their faces. Finally, they emerged out of the wilderness and a clearing opened up before them. "The Chinzi highway lies just ahead," announced the wizard. "We must cross quickly, unseen if possible. It is best not to attract attention of any kind." As they approached the clearing, Losgrel motioned for everyone to stop as he rode forward to assess the road. He and his horse, Glide, disappeared from view of the group. He traversed the road for some distance, then back the other way. Seeing no trace of other travelers, he came back to them and motioned for them to cross. In front of them lay a smooth gravel-covered road wide enough for 4 carriages side by side with room to spare. The fine gravel had a special mineral mixed in with it which at night would reflect the moonlight, making for a beautiful and mysterious spectacle. Losgrel motioned for Milo and Longfellow to dismount and go back with him to smooth out their tracks which cut across the road, especially those belonging to Jack. 1 hurdle passed. Many more to go, mused Burdoc as he gave a final look behind. As they rode on, Burdoc sped ahead to the front of the group where Losgrel was. Low voices could be heard by the others as they strained to listen. "What are they saying?" whispered Longfellow to Milo. Milo shrugged as Nipari approached. "There is an enchanted forest ahead," said the seer. Moments later, Burdoc fell back with the others, and they approached a tree line with gnarled and twisted trees with emerald-colored moss and lichen clinging to their bark. A strange dust seemed to emanate from the forest, catching the sun's rays and sparkled with an eerie glow. Within 300 feet of the forest, Losgrel turned right, avoiding the mystical wood, following a narrow footpath in the grass and snow-covered field. The path seemed to keep the same distance from the forest for about 2 more hours of the ride before receding to the east. Soon they were again heading south, and Burdoc reminisced about the history of the land and the way things once were. Before the encroachment of that wicked forest, these fields were once used by local farmers to graze their cattle upon. Now they are, let us just say, restricted in their use. What happened with the forest? Asked Longfellow. It is a long and complicated tale, but a witch, Trishta the Silver, put a spell on the land to the south of the road. It all has but worn off except for the forest. Even all these years, even after her banishment, her spell bitterly clings to that wretched place, explained the Red Wizard. How was she banished? Asked Long. Burdoc, changing the subject, announced the open spaces of the fields will come to an end soon, replaced by dense woods and swamp. A difficult and dangerous route it will be. Before we embark, we will set up camp and get a good night's rest. We will need it.